this will so fundamentally transform the way that work is performed that were you not to embrace it, you would be turning up to a workplace that was utterly alien to you. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Undocked, and welcome back to you, Nick Chubb.
Thank you very much. I've had a lovely holiday, and now I'm back, ready and raring to go to talk all things maritime tech, like a real nerd.
Refreshed, I hope.
Yeah, exactly. Very refreshed.
Good. But you've come straight back into the foray, as it were, because I noticed no sooner had you touched back down into the UK than you were celebrating a bit of a milestone with 6 years of Thetius, your company.
Yeah. Well, funnily enough, we go away every year for my wife's birthday. And so obviously it's the same week every year. Just finished a job and decided I was going to start Thetius. And I thought to myself, I'll wait until after her birthday and then throw myself into the company fully. So now every year, the anniversary of the company falls on a day that I'm normally on leave. So it was actually on the Friday that I was on leave. So I had absolutely no idea that was coming. And then I logged on Monday morning. It's like, oh, yeah, it's been 6 years. Fancy that.
That's
Time
amazing.
flies.
Well, it's a huge achievement. And I'm kind of, I remember when you started it. So it was, I guess it's worthy of reflection, I think, in a few ways, because obviously 6 years might seem a sort of strange sort of marker. But I think when you're in a small business, every year is a marker, isn't it? Essentially. You know what I mean?
True.
Like it's that kind of.
And I'm really bad with anniversaries and birthdays and all that sort of stuff. So I let 5 years go by without any real marker, which was an error. But I'm really pleased that the team made sure we marked 6 years.
Yeah. And in the beginning, it was just you to start with, or was David involved from the very beginning? Or
it was just me to start with, but only for sort of 6-7 months. So I started in July. We kind of launched the first version of the platform in September with the first report and hired the first team member around about September as well. David joined in April of 2020. We met in February 2020. We had a really good conversation and I was really excited about him joining the team. And then he just ghosted me for about 2 months. I was like, oh, so rude. I can't believe it. And it turns out he had COVID and he had it really badly. So fair enough. We let him off for that. So he joined the team in the April of 2020. And I think getting David on was pretty transformative. He initially joined in a sales role, but very quickly sort of moved up and became a partner in the business and B, managing director of the company. So which has taken all the management away from me, which has been a really good move for us as a company. I think for everyone internally is grateful for that. I'm grateful for it. And Dave has all the headaches.
I think it's interesting because we talk a lot about companies and we talk about M&A deals and we talk about opportunities for startups and that kind of thing. What was it that you saw as the opportunity in the market all those 6 years ago?
So I when I first came ashore, I spent a bit of time in technology outside of shipping. I really struggled to get a job in the maritime sector. So I ended up doing 2 years actually working in recruitment. I started in financial services recruitment and found it a little bit dull, so then moved to technology recruitment. And I worked for a startup that was building a hiring platform for software engineers. And that meant we were working with lots of other startups that were sort of based around Shoreditch. And there's just so much exciting stuff going on. And none of it, or at least very, very little of it, was happening in maritime. And it just struck me as a bit strange. This is going back 10, 11 years now. I worked for a couple of years for the Marine Society, running a digital transformation project where we took what was traditional correspondence courses where packs were being physically sent out to the vessel and then the essays were being done by the seafarer and they were physically sending the essays back to shoreside to be marked. So we moved on to a digital platform for seafarer education, and that grew very, very quickly and was very well received. I got involved in a startup that was creating a port call optimization platform for container ships. And so I saw that there was a kind of critical mass forming, maybe, 100, 150 odd companies that were just starting to get going in this space. And I was getting asked by various people to, I guess, kind of see who is interesting, where's money going, who should we be worried about, who should we potentially be looking at buying, by various people that I was sort of speaking to. And I tried using all the big tools like Gartner and Crunchbase and CB Insights to systematically find these companies and conduct research on these companies. But the problem with all of them is that shipping in their databases could be anything from like last mile logistics software to scrubbers. And there was nothing in between. There was no fidelity to the data. So kind of came to the conclusion that really to kind of scratch my own itch, I needed my own database of startups that were doing interesting things in maritime and what specific parts of maritime were they working with. And then over time, when it kind of really felt like there was a need for this, it ended up being sort of all innovation. The really fortunate, not fortunate for the world, but fortunate for my business timing was that we started in July 19. By March 2020, every shipping company had to move very, very quickly on digital transformation because they all had to move to remote working, remote operations near enough overnight. And so we grew a lot through COVID because of that push. And possibly, I think luck and timing has a huge role to play in these things. And I think we were just very lucky. We're in the right place at the right time to capitalize on it.
Yeah. So one takeaway is that, like, to anyone aspiring to start their own business and in this way, is to be lucky. I always say, I think it's the most underestimated quality. Like when we started Ocean Technologies Group in 2020 March, and had the plan of like, we need to kind of everyone to understand this brand and what it's all about. And COVID hit, and because I'd spent a lot of time moving education online and using it, I was just ready and I knew exactly how to do it. And everyone else was flat-footed. Nobody, everyone was stuck in their house, couldn't do it. So you could get everyone's attention. And I often wonder how it might have been different if we hadn't had that. And of course, it was a huge tragedy for lots and lots of people. So I don't want to underestimate that. But I think, like you said, timing is everything. And of course, I think the other thing with luck is it's one thing for something to land in your lap, but it's another thing to make the best of the opportunity. So I don't downplay that as well. So
luck is a skill in my view. I think it's chance, which is the kind of genuine luck bit, multiplied by surface area, which is your ability to go out and get exposed to those elements of chance. And I think you can be systematic about that.
And your ability to improvise. I think that when I look at my career and I think about where I've kind of made mistakes, quite often been planning too far into the future. And you just missed what's here and now because you're trying to kind of do the right thing. You're trying to, well, if I plan it all now, I'll get the maximum efficiencies and all that. But of course, the things are moving so fast and changing so fast that I think, sometimes that can be a problem. And I've worked with technology leaders, very similar. They have these enormous plans, but they never get to them because they're constantly having to rewrite and refactor. I mean, just kind of, it might seem a little self-indulgent to talk about this, but I do think, you've created a seminal company there. And I think it's good to reflect on, the Thetius story is also the story of a lot of businesses that have worked with you and on that research, and a lot of those startups and scale ups, and you've worked with pretty much all of them, haven't you? I mean, in some way, shape or form, either looking into them for research purposes or undertaking research on their behalf.
Yeah, I mean, certainly we've certainly monitored and tracked all of them, or at least as many of them as we possibly can, and we've definitely built up a bit of a kind of audience and ecosystem of technology innovators. I would say one of the other things that we realized fairly early on, and one of the early mistakes that we made was thinking that startups and really small businesses would be our customers, which was an error because love working with startups and love working with entrepreneurial types, but they're totally chaotic and they never have any money. So if you're going to run a small business, don't try and sell to startups would be my kind of number one piece of advice. Once we realized that actually the kind of mid-tier end of the market, mid to kind of large tier end of the market from a technology supplier standpoint, and then also private equity investors who are investing in that space, that then became a massive unlock for us for growth, because there were kind of serious clients who really needed the research and had the time and the space to really value the research, and obviously had the budget to work with us. And so definitely understanding your clients and picking the right kind of clients to be working with, I think, is super important. We do actually have a great track record, and thank you for being part of that journey, of companies who choose to work with us and then within about 12, 18 months end up getting acquired. So, we did that with OTG. We've done it now with Danelec. quite recently, Cyber being acquired by DMV. There's actually quite a long list of our clients who end up going on to be acquired. And then it took a little longer to get the ship owning clients on board, because I think that's just the nature of the beast. I think it takes a little longer to build up that trust. But actually, we've got some fantastic ship owners, ship managers, and ports and terminals that we work with these days as well, that A, provide a lot of insight back to us, and B, get a lot of value out of that kind of long-term view on the market.
Yeah, I think getting that breadth of client base is almost like hedging to me. We looked at a lot of businesses over the last 5 years, and you'd see ones that were like really super dependent on one or two clients, and you're like, this is very, very thin. And it's the same with, markets dip. That's why I think when you look at businesses and they have a foothold in bulk, in tankers, in passenger ship, if you've got that kind of spread, it makes you much more robust to different market fluctuations. And of course, it's a virtuous in the sense that the more players you have in your data ecosystem, the more one is adding value to the other. So working out how you build that sort of breadth, but without getting into that situation where you're moving every piece on the chessboard one square forward and it not really getting momentum. So it's a tricky thing.
It's a really hard thing to balance. Like, we had 3-4 years ago, we had a real customer concentration problem where probably 50% of the business was maybe 2 clients, and we love those clients and they're fantastic to work with. But at the same time, a change in budget could end up, losing half the business. And so we worked really, really hard to move away from that level of concentration, which sometimes is quite difficult when you've got kind of long-standing client relationships where you've had almost like a kind of concierge service for those small number of really important clients for a number of years. But now we're in a position where, I think we've got something like 50, 60 clients that we're regularly working with, and it just makes things much less de-risked and much easier to plan and build a team and all of that sort of stuff, which is super important.
Yeah, definitely. We talked about luck. It's not a very helpful thing for us to give to people as advice, is it? We talked about being able to improvise, which certainly is, I think, really good advice. But what are some of the other things you've seen? You mentioned a lot of those businesses that are planning for an exit or an acquisition. Have you seen anything about all those businesses that you could collectively pinpoint as being good sound advice, or patterns that you've seen in those businesses?
One that people often miss in Maritime is understanding market size and actually understanding the limitations of the market size. So roughly speaking, Maritime software is about a $300 billion market. So that's across ship owning, ports and chartering. So it sounds like it's not a huge market, but it's reasonably sized, and there's plenty of room in that. But actually, when you start to break it down by segment, if you sell to ship managers, you may not necessarily sell to ship owners. If you sell to ship owners, you're unlikely to sell to ports and terminals. And if you sell to charterers, it's unlikely to sell to the others. So unless you have a product that can actually cut across all of those segments, the likelihood of you having what I would describe as a kind of traditionally venture backable business is actually quite slim. And therefore, I think if I were to offer some advice to anyone going down this path, it would be think very, very carefully about taking on external capital and how you do it and how much capital you take on and at what valuation, etc. And so, I think that's a really important thing to think about is really understanding what are the limitations in the market, what are the potential limitations in the product, and then how do you build appropriately, how do you raise capital appropriately.
But let me kind of make one observation, right? One of the things that I reckon will be fairly common amongst all of the businesses that you work for that sort of, that grew and then were snapped up and acquired. I imagine them will almost certainly have a pretty strong web presence, a pretty strong social media presence. You would expect them to have a fairly good track record in the market, let's say going back 2-3 years, maybe something like that. And a really clear, visible value proposition, right? That would be something you would expect. Yes. So I've got to ask you about the Orbit MI acquisition. And I'm not even sure how we say the name of these guys. Is it Cubia?
I thought it was Auqub. So I see where you're going with this. No website, no presence in the market. Good point.
I did some, after you mentioned you were going to bring them up,
you did some digging.
I had a look. This is an acquisition we're talking about, people here. And it's Orbit MI, who I didn't really know very much about. And I started reading about them. They're actually a very interesting company.
I'll give you a brief explainer on who they are. So Orbit MI were spun out of Stena Bulk. And initially, the kind of Stena Bulk team said, look, can we just get some very clever data scientists and AI people together in a room and have them knock heads and give them access to our fleet information for a couple of years and just see what happens? And what happened was Orbit MI, ultimately. And so after about 18 months, it got spun out. These days, I would describe it as a kind of voyage data platform. So they can ingest data from lots of different places, third-party applications directly from the ship. They have a kind of data transformer on that can live on the ship and to process data, bring it all into a standard data set, single source of truth for the fleet. And then they can spit that data out into lots of different places. So they have their own applications internally, interfaces that are helpful in their own right. But a big part of their value proposition is that through APIs, you can take that data and put it into a whole load of other different applications to allow you to work more efficiently. Ultimately, that's what it comes down to. So the kind of core mission is to improve decision making and improve the efficiency of data management within a fleet. And they took a major investment from Bureau Veritas, I want to say 18 months, 2 years ago. And this, I think, unless they've done some under the radar, this I think is their first acquisition. And I would describe it really as a bit of an acquihire. They've got Alexandre Lapointe, who I think you have worked with previously, who was certainly ex One Ocean.
He's ex One Ocean alumni, and predating that, I think it was with a Marine Press. He comes from Marine Press, so
Right.
One Ocean
Yeah.
was a sort of a conglomerate built up of lots of maritime businesses acquired by Lloyd's Register, and I think Alexandra was with them until I think summer last year, I think, something like that. So yeah, so I think I may have met him. Apologies, Alexandra, if we have met, but certainly we've moved in the same circles for sure. But this was really interesting. You mentioned it was a what did you call it? Acquihire. Is that what you call it? I love that. That's
Yeah.
great. I should know that expression. And we're saying that because I couldn't find a website. I don't think there are any posts on LinkedIn, but it's got some interesting stuff that maybe we can dig into and hypothesize about, but that just in what limited information is there. Fundamentally, this is a very new business in the AI space that's been picked up, it would seem, very early stage. But this is not something that I've come across at all. Because there's been a few times in the last 5 years where I've sort of thought that business is really not going anywhere. But if we bought that business, we could really do something with that because the people in there are exciting. You know, they've got good ideas and good talents. And every time I've suggested that, it's been like, no, because they're not adding any EBITDA, they're not adding any customer reach. There's no cross-sell opportunity or whatever. So this is quite, I mean, certainly to my mind, very unusual that you see this kind of acquihire, as you call it, which is great.
It's really interesting. It just kind of, as you've been speaking, it's kind of triggered a thought for me. So it's a very common thing to do and a very fashionable thing to do in the kind of wider tech scene. So, you know, if you go to Silicon Valley, lots of startups will be started in the first kind of 6-12 months. Really, the kind of value of that startup is the team, is the talent that have come together to do it. The kind of acquihire is that there may be something of a product that's worth taking on, but really you're trying to get your hands on the team and what they would be able to contribute internally. And something similar has gone on here. The interesting thing about that for me is that Ali, the CEO of Orbit, is not he is now, but he wasn't a maritime tech CEO. He was a tech CEO. He's scaled a number of technology companies, a number of software companies to very, very sizable exits outside of maritime over a kind of 20-year career. This is his first venture in the maritime space. And I think culturally, he's bringing in quite a lot of what I would describe as kind of Silicon Valley style approach to things like M&A that we wouldn't ordinarily see in the maritime world. And so it's quite interesting that you kind of raise that as a rare thing to do in this industry. And I don't disagree. The other one that happened 4 months ago was Sedna acquiring Flitter, which I think was only a team of 2 people. And again, I would describe that as a kind of acquihire. They're both, as I understand it, Auqub probably more than Flitter. They're both in the world of agentic AI. And that is AI agents that don't just produce text as an LLM producing text into a chat interface. They have the ability to kind of interact with the world. So the ability to take action. And I think what's interesting about that is that these 2 companies, but I think particularly Orbit, they've really gone down this route with this particular acquisition. They want to be in the world of agentic AI, and the most efficient way to do that is to acquire the expertise in. And by placing Alexandra, who was the CEO of Auqub, into the chief product officer role, you can see directionally they are clearly going in the direction of agentic AI as a core part of their strategy, which is quite exciting. It's the first kind of major move that I've seen where someone said we are absolutely going after this space in quite a big way, and therefore have made acquisitions along those lines.
Yeah, and tellingly, we talked about his CV there and that deep maritime understanding as well. It wouldn't be hard, I don't think, to go out and buy a small agentic AI startup. There must be dozens and dozens out there of people that are putting this sort of stuff together. Finding somebody that has that deep knowledge of maritime and deep understanding of operations, particularly when you want to go the agentic route, I think that's quite a rare thing. And that may be, again, part of the thinking. And it's interesting. I kind of picked up on a few things in there and the limited information that's available. Our specialized AI agents, I don't know how to pronounce this, Cubia, HR and talent management, Cubex, financial intelligence, and Cubian knowledge and resolution work together to help businesses operate smarter, maximize efficiency, drive sustainable growth. But it's just those three areas, HR and talent management, which is obviously my big area. And I've been very steeped in looking at this. So this is exciting for me personally. Then the financial intelligence, then the knowledge resolution. It'd be interesting to see which of those, because looking at the existing Orbit MI, is this indicative of them wanting to widen the play there, or are they just going to say, well, actually, that's what they were doing, but we just want to use the agentic kind of talent? It'd be interesting to see how that kind of develops. Do you have any thoughts, knowing them, what aspect of it they'll be thinking about?
My current understanding of what they do is that they are pretty laser focused on voyage operations, kind of voyage optimization, voyage management, the routing, those types of things. So I would be surprised if they expanded out into something that was more around the kind of technical management side of things. But who knows? One thing I will say that they seem to be very good at is that they spend a huge amount of time with customers. Their top leadership spends a huge amount of time with customers, and I think they're very good at reacting very quickly to where they see a need. Again, it comes back to your point about luck and timing and actually your ability to take action on something. I think they're pretty good at that as a team.
Yeah. And if we're going to come back to, that we talked about sort of tips for people, kind of, focus, I think, is a massive one, right? Because there's opportunity everywhere, particularly if you're going to be in this space right now. You're going to have a million people wanting to talk to you, and really understanding what you're going for and having that focus is going to be really important. But anyway, within what you're describing there about that change to agentic AI, I'm going to share with you something that I picked up on this week, which is the concept of the superworker. Now, I don't know if you've come across this term. You want one? Everyone.
I don't know what it is yet, but I want it.
Well, this is a kind of comes from a guy, or at least I picked it up. I assume he's the guy that's looking to codify it, a guy called Josh Bersin in the States, and he works in sort of HR fields and learning development as well. And it's a sort of an articulation of what human being plus AI is all about. And there's a few things that I think are interesting about it. So it basically talks about 4 sort of evolutionary stages that the human superworker will go through. So the first one is one that probably most people listening will be familiar with. And so this is AI as helpful assistant. And this is where the AI is sort of taking care of simple tasks. So it could be a chat bot involved in that as well. So it might not be that there's a human sitting next to it, but fundamentally it's the AI's assistant, but it's the human that's doing the work, really, fundamentally. So the human will be putting the FAQ together, and then the AI will kind of manage that sort of chatbot interface. So when you're using ChatGPT to help with stuff, that's typically going to be AI as a helpful assistant, let's say. Second one is more what we've been talking about, is AI as agent. And this is where it's automating tasks within routine jobs. So if we sort of take one of the examples he gives is a marketing assistant. So the AI agent is writing the social media posts for you. So in other words, you're kind of saying, well, here's some information, write me a bunch of social media posts. And so you're delegating that work fundamentally. So the AI is automating the task, but the human is taking the lead in saying what needs to happen. The third stage is sort of an AI multifunctional agent. And this is where I think is the sort of thing that we can sort of start to think about with the kind of things we've been talking about with that acquisition. And this is where the agent is working systematically across the organization. So across a number of functions, supporting multiple areas. So they're looking at company-wide information and they're saying, right, finance needs these things and this department needs these instructions and this kind of thing. So here it's AI is kind of optimizing things and the human is really just overseeing what that's then doing. And then the fourth stage, which is the kind of shiny and exciting one, is the AI as autonomous agents. So this is really moving towards them without intervention, fundamentally, unless they flag that a human touch is needed. So the agent will call out for, hey, you should come and have a look at this based on various rules. And where that's described as really the kind of super worker, it's positioned that the human then is free to focus on what they call higher value human kind of things. So all the things that we have very little time for as workers today. So things like sort of, the leadership side, the mentoring, creativity, innovation, thinking about what's going to come next, because the machine is doing all of that routine, procedural kind of work. So that's kind of like, as it's presented, these 4-stage evolution. And I think it's quite a helpful way of looking at it. Does that sort of make sense to you to break it into in that?
It does. Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And I can definitely see, we're probably at phase 2 of that internally. We haven't gone quite as far as having what I would call genuine agents that are able to do the kind of management or do some of the work for us. But we have specialist GPTs that do things like transcript processing for us. So we conduct something like 250 interviews a year now, and they have to be fully anonymized. And so the raw transcript goes into this GPT. It then gets processed into a kind of summary document as transcript as well, and then that then gets put into our database. Same with all of the kind of market monitoring stuff that we do. We have kind of full workflow that summarizes all of the market monitoring activity and makes sure that then a human who basically supervises it, who is an expert, is one of our analysts, sort of says this is good, this is bad, kick some stuff out, take some stuff in, make sure we don't miss things. What's interesting is taking that to stage 3 and then stage 4 and kind of how far can you take that? We've always found, and this is possibly going back to a kind of pre-AI world, that the more you automate, the more quality drops. So striking the balance between human supervision and how you keep humans in the loop, I think is going to be the big challenge of the next kind of 5 years or so.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that's interesting about it is to get to that level of automation, you obviously got to hook your agents into the systems that you use itself. And to use one example, if I'm going to write a job description, these are his kind of examples that he gives. But if I'm going to write a job description, I'll conduct some interviews with 4 or 5 people, and then I'm going to kind of then take all their output and say to the chat GPT, please write me a summary of all that and into a job description. We've all kind of done similar sort of things to that. Take that a step further. It's like the instruction is to the agent, I want you to contact these people. Here's their email addresses in these different departments that I've got. Send them an email, get their answer to these questions, write me a bunch of questions, ask them those questions. Could even do it with a phone call if I mean there are people using these kind of agents that actually talk to you. And and so it's really kind of you're instructing it to go off and perform the task more or less in its entirety, right? And then to bring it back to me for review at this stage, and otherwise kind of then send it off here. But it does require that it's hooked into your email systems or that it's into your data systems. And that I think is some really interesting discussions to have there around governance and how that works, and dependency, by the way, on this. Because if this is becoming an interface into all of your systems and it's building intelligence within it, you're becoming very dependent on that. And we'll come back to that point, I'm sure. But the one I wanted to go to and challenge, because we've talked about this in a previous episode from a creativity point of view around, is there a role for human beings and will it be taste makers, people who have better taste and better ability to kind of work with the agents, almost more in a kind of producer role rather than perhaps in a in an actor role or a director role.
Yeah.
But this idea here is that the super workers, you'll still have a job, you'll just be doing all the kind of groovy stuff. So let's dig into that and let's see. So there's some interesting statistics behind this. So if we think about the spend on human capital within an organization, okay, and it's not going to be exclusively payroll, but let's look at that kind of human related spend. So not the building, not the rent, not the, what's the human spend? Typically, it's about a 4-to-1 ratio. So around 23% going to sort of IT systems that support the kind of the human sort of capital management side of it, and the rest of it going to the humans themselves. So the assumption here is that we're going to start putting more and more into systems and AI to allow this kind of super worker to imagine to grow. So the trend, when you look at spend within this, is that a rough rise of around 9% in the IT spend. And of that IT spend, at the moment, those projections are around 60 to 70% of that additional 9% spend going into AI. Now, my question to you is, are these companies going to say, well, we're just going to have our cost base go up by 10% so we can cover this and create all these super work? Or do we think
I know where this is going,
that maybe the 10% that's now going into IT systems that can facilitate this kind of AI work might come from the bit that's spent on human beings at the moment? So, I mean, I think money is essentially being moved from that human capital spend into AI investment. And this is pretty much mandated now, right, from most boardrooms.
Some quite famous examples of that, and of that done badly or kind of botched as well. So the one that springs to mind immediately is Klarna. I think 18 months ago, the Klarna CEO just said he will not hire unless we can prove that that it can't be done by AI. And they actually ended up, they didn't make anyone redundant, but through attrition, cut their headcount by something like 20-30%. So just as people started leaving, they just said, we're just not replacing your role. However, a couple of other CEOs, I'm struggling to remember the names of who they are, a couple of other quite prominent tech CEOs have said similar things in the last few months, and then just received enormous blowback from the market, and essentially people saying that it's such an immoral thing to be thinking like this. And so I think there is like a genuine balancing act that needs to be that needs to be in place. But I think the answer to your question is, overall, my view is that the 9% increase will come from growth in productivity of the people. So productivity, generally speaking, has been pretty flat for like the last 20-30 years. We're now at the beginning of an entirely new wave of productivity that we should see. And so I don't necessarily see the human spending being cut as a proportion, but I see the whole overall growing. And so I guess as a proportion, therefore, it would be cut. In real terms, it wouldn't be a cut. It would be the use of the increased productivity. That's my general take, but let's see.
Well, this is the thing. Why is AI So why is AI such a fixation for so many businesses? It's around that, let's be kind, productivity or cost savings. And I think most people in their quarterly calls with their investors, their boards, will be having a conversation that's around wanting to hear that. They are wanting to hear, how is AI either kind of reducing the cost base or allowing scale up? So it might be with the existing number of people, but the ambition is to scale the business without scaling the cost base. It's got to be one of those two things that they're looking at. Now, what's interesting about that is that fundamentally, well, the concept of the super worker, to come back to Josh Bersin's nice video and stuff, is that the company is basically facilitating this change to the super worker. So the company has to be geared towards changing their business processes, etc., to investing in sort of training to enable for that person to become a super worker. Now, the thing that's interesting as a counterpoint to that is that actually there was an IDECO survey in which 75 to 80% of C-level people were when asked around how are people going to make use of AI in their business, their expectation, 75 to 80% of them, was that their staff are going to work it out. Okay. Their staff will be the ones who will figure that out.
Right.
Now, how likely is that going to be if people are also suffering anxiety, which they are?
Yeah.
About
so turkey's voting for Christmas.
exactly the note. So I remembered this point. It was exactly what I've got written down here. Turkey's voting for Christmas. You're basically saying to your workforce, please go out and figure out how we can do this without you. And so I think the real thing I wanted to kind of zoom in on here is that we have this massive opportunity. We have this mandated expectation from investors and from boards that AI is going to be taken forward, is going to kind of deliver these benefits. You've got that clear investment. The money is moving. In 9%, I'm surprised it isn't higher, to be honest. But if you think of that 9%, 60, 70% is AI, okay, that's big. But it's that organizational change and transformation piece of working out how you're going to bring people with you on that journey and how they are going to affect and make that change. That seems to look to me right now like a massive black hole. And I can't think of many businesses that are well equipped to be able to handle it in the correct way.
Coming back to advice for any individuals, not at an organizational level, at an individual level, is that I think what you're saying there creates such an incredible opportunity for any individual's career that wants to grasp this stuff and learn how to use it and run with it. Because I think it will be in 10 years' time, turning up to the office not using AI will be like turning up to the office without your laptop today. It'd be such a fundamental tool and so hardwired into everything that we do that you will have to learn about it if you want to stay in the workforce. The advantage that there is no downside now to over-indexing on AI, in my opinion, at an individual level. If you take 20 hours a week and really, really force yourself to learn as much as you possibly can about this stuff, I think the payoff for your career would be enormous. Conversely, if you treat it with the kind of fear side of things, which is totally understandable, makes perfect sense. Like, it's a perfectly natural sort of human emotional reaction to think like that. But if you treat it like that, I think you will end up regretting it in 3, 5, 10 years time when you're dragged kicking and screaming into this future.
Well, I agree 100%, and I'll raise you. I think that this will so fundamentally transform the way that work is performed that were you not to embrace it, you would be turning up to a workplace that was utterly alien to you and you were unable to do any of the things you were going to do. And I have reached that point kicking and screaming. But the reality is that this is moving at such a tremendous pace. Once I kind of realized that this is real, this is happening, you then start to say, well, how would that then work? And I think that's what's useful about this idea of the super worker, is it gives people some agency about being able to think around where they're going to fit into that future. And exactly to your point. So when you're talking to your kids around, what's it going to look like? Am I going to have a job, Dad? That's the job. The job is working 100%. Out how you can effectively have a endless supply of digital minions to kind of bring forth the vision that you want to have. And the only way you can do that is to really understand and to start working with it and to get yourself in the driving seat, because otherwise you're just sitting there waiting for the tide to come in and take you.
I'll give you one other little story on this topic that I think you'll find interesting. And credit here goes to Fiona McDonald on our team who writes the brief. The brief that came out on Tuesday looked into AI and how AI impacts creativity. And she pulled together 3 really interesting academic studies. So I'll just take you through each study. So the first study found that using ChatGPT increased the creativity of generated ideas with not using any technology or a conventional web search. So people were asked to basically come up with some creative writing. You can use ChatGPT to come up with the ideas, or you can a control group weren't allowed to use AI. So increased creativity if you're using AI. Another study found that writers who used AI ended up with work that was judged as more original, fluent, and even more enjoyable to read. That was particularly true for people who weren't naturally bursting with creativity to begin with. So AI can give your ideas a bit of a lift, but here's the catch. AI might help individual creativity, but it actually hurts group creativity. So the third study found that the more people that used AI to generate ideas, the more those ideas started to look and sound the same. So your individual outputs improve and seem more novel and reads well and on a standalone level looks fantastic. AI generated content as a whole tends to cluster around very similar themes and ideas across vast numbers of different users. And you can kind of see that if you go into social media, you can kind of spot the AI generated content because of little turns of phrase that they use, or the ideas that they're exploring, or how they're wording things. And I think used in the right way, with genuine human creativity, where someone's willing to be a bit contrarian and come up with something truly original, and then layering AI onto that is hugely powerful. Used in the wrong way, you still end up just the same as everyone else.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And that's kind of what I was trying to get to when we were talking in that earlier episode around, like, will a class of artists kind of appear who are working with AI in a different way? And I think I've got where is it? It's somewhere on my shelf around here. So these are I can't remember what they're called. I got these years ago, but these are by Brian Eno and Peter Schmidt, and it's called Oblique Strategies. It's this little box called Oblique Strategies. And what this is, these are a number of cards. And the idea of these is when you're creatively blocked, you take one of these cards, almost like in a kind of voodoo sense, like whichever fate will determine. And that will kickstart your creativity in a different way. I'll pull a couple out. Let's see what we get, right? I'll just give them a shuffle so there's no, people don't think I've, and these really are right next to where I was sat, was the only reason I was able to grab them. I didn't plan this part of the discussion, but yeah, so you get things in here, like, so yeah, which elements can be grouped is one here. So another one, always first steps. This is perhaps a bit easier for people to follow, but so how would you have done it, right? So these are kind of questions, and you pull it out, and they're meant to do it. And this is one of the ways that I've been using AI, not with these cards. The idea just kind of occurred to me, but when I've been doing something and using AI and generating it, and I've got that little feeling there, it's a little bit like, just throw something mad in. And you get some really interesting stuff. So some of the things that that I've been working on, I've just kind of gone like, so I've allowed that sort of creative part of your brain, and then just mixed it together with something that can kind of help you to kind of get that chaos into sort of something on a page. And that I think that's where I think you'll get this kind of this blend of human creativity going. And the other thing that's kind of interesting as well is that if companies did go that route of saying, well, we want all the benefits of the productivity, but we don't need to reduce the cost base. We want more ideas. We want to see where this goes, and allows that sort of, that creativity to take place. Almost kind of flips the dial a little bit, because I think what's frustrating for a lot of people in the way that AI has kind of evolved is that people thought that the computers would do all the boring stuff and fix the washing machine and sort the broadband out, and that, and all those things that just annoy you. Whereas the machines are making music and creativity, and you're still having to take the laundry out and do all the crap, sort of. And I think that's the bit that would sell it to workers, I think, a little bit more, if they could see a future where they were still kind of doing a lot of that ideation. And I think so. Yeah, it's early days, right? It's still fundamentally early days.
I have a custom GPT that I created that's kind of like a kind of coaching tool, but the system level prompt for it is that basically it can only ask me questions. It can't give an opinion, can't summarize things. Everything it has to pose back to me is a question. So just straight away, anytime I go onto it, if I'm stuck on any kind of issue, it just starts to ask me more and more questions. And obviously it asks quite intelligent questions, very good questions. And that just helps me to then unblock myself, if that makes sense, and kind of boost my own creativity without necessarily just getting the answers from AI. It's actually helping to get stuff out of my head, which is, I have found over the last few months, incredibly valuable.
Yeah, and I think that's the idea with the Brian Eno and Peter Schmidt card, the oblique strategies. It's like, the answer somewhere in there. It's somewhere inside that, because that's what's making you want to create something, right? You've got something and it's almost kind of that constraints. By constraining, that creativity kind of explode, or and I think that's that's a really good way of doing it, is kind of also let the machine challenge you, because that's the thing that's also quite worrying, is that if you delegate everything to the machine, you won't eventually be able to do it. That part of your brain, that muscle in your brain, will start to fade and disappear. Whereas if you actually still are very actively involved in the process, I don't know about you, but I have a bit of a relationship with it, like it's kind of that assistant and I even talk to it like it's a person, you know. I don't want to be too harsh, you know. I'll go like, I like what you did with that, you know. That was good, wasn't it? But man, it just feels a little bit generic, you know. Like, what could we do? Maybe we could do, you know, like, and it's more fun to do it that way as well. It's learning. I'm
Oh,
always
I'm
very
not like that
polite
at
as
all.
well. I'm always like, oh,
I'm so
thank you.
rude. I'm
Oh,
so
yeah,
rude. Yeah, no, I'm terrible.
that's brilliant.
The way I speak to my AI, I would never speak to a human.
That's brilliant. One day they'll rise up, Nick, and
Yeah,
they'll
I know.
remember
Yeah.
you,
They'll
and
save
they'll
you.
remember me, and I'll be like, they'll be kind to me. They'll let me still have a crust of bread now and again in my dark dungeon with the plugs in the back of my head from the Matrix or whatever. But you'll be just used as,
I'll be gone.
yeah, they'll just use you as fertilizer. Right. We've probably not, that's probably all we've got time for, isn't it?
I think it probably is, isn't it? There's a couple more, but let's save them for next week.
Yeah.
And that at least gives people a reason to come back next week.
That's right. Yeah. And one last question. You know, 6 years of Thetius or 8 5-star reviews on Spotify, which
Yeah,
are you
8
more
now.
proud of?
Ooh.
Yeah.
I must say, when I see a review on Spotify, it makes me so immeasurably happy. And actually, I will say, although we're getting some really great feedback, so thank you for everyone who keeps sending messages and leaving comments and things. It genuinely means a lot. We are halfway through what we said would be our initial run of 12. This is episode 6. So again, if you want to keep these going beyond episode 12, then make sure you leave a review on Spotify. Do you know what is criminal? We've got reviews coming in at left, right, and centre on Spotify, nothing on Apple. And we now have 30% of our audience is Apple Podcasts. So if you listen on Apple Podcasts, please leave a review there. If it's a good review, then please leave it there. If it's a bad review, then just privately tell us. It does help the visibility of the podcast. And if the podcast gets great visibility, then in time, we're going to be able to get really good guests on, which we've started working on over the last few weeks, and we're really excited about what's coming over the next few months if we choose to keep going. So make sure you leave a comment, leave a review, wherever you're listening to this.
And with that,
Don't I sign off? Bye.
bye.